Hi everyone. So today Salesforce Lightning day 22. Let's see what are we going to learn today. So we'll quickly go through the previous session overview and we'll talk about the component event and just a recap of the component event. Then we'll talk about the helper and when to use the controller versus helper and calling the server side class and how to use the lightning select. What is the purpose of lightning select? We will see that. And the homework conclusion quiz, today's interview question. So quickly, what did we learn in last class?
We will add those few methods. What is event, application event, trigger firing the application event from child class to parent class.
Right. So that's what we have seen. So last time we had created an application and from the application we were calling the parent component. So in this parent component, we have implemented a parent component. From the parent component, we are calling a child component. After calling the child component, we are doing the table here. So in the child component, the data, what are the input fields are there, the data, everything is displayed in the child component. So in the child component, we have two buttons here, save and cancel button. So when user clicks on a save button, what it does, whatever the user has entered the data here, it sends the details to the event. And once the event receives the data from child component, whoever is handling it. So basically parent is handles. So whenever the parent is handling, as soon as it sees any updates in the event, immediately sends a response back to the parent component, and inside the parent component, the data will be displayed. So position name will be displayed here, email name will be displayed here, address will be displayed here. So this is what we have seen in the last class. Now, we will see going further. So last class, we just have seen just using the parent component, child component, and event handler. Same concept. What I'll do is I'll use the Apex class. This time, what I'm going to do is I'll enable the communication between the Lightning component and application, Apex class. So in the Apex class, I have two methods. One method is inserting the account, the data, whatever I'm receiving it from here. Example, here I have an account name, email, right? So address, these all information is there. So one method is to insert the account. Another method is to query the data. That means get the data from database. So what happens is when I click on a save button, previously what happened, it went to event and event pass the data to the parent component. So this time, as the server side call is involved here, as soon as I click on a save, the first thing it will go to the Apex class, because why I'm using here Apex class. So in previous example, we have not used the database. We have not used the database. So this time I'm going to insert the data into database. So the first scenario is as soon as I click on a save button, it goes to the method one, and method one will insert the data into the account. Once it is successfully inserted, then the method one return the ID back to the event. That means the response is actually goes to the child component, and child component sends to the event. Now, once the event receives the ID, this event is going to pass the information to parent component. Now, parent component here, it is just passing the ID. It's not passing the complete record, right? So event is not passing the complete record. Event is just passing the ID. So what parent component has to do based on that ID, again, it has to talk to Apex method, which is a method 2. And this is parameterized method where the ID is passed from the parent component to Apex method. And this method will take the ID. Based on the ID, it is going to retrieve the data from database, and then it is going to send the response back to the parent component, and parent component will display the data here. Right? So far we have, in the last session, we have just used the event between the child component and parent component. We were passing the data using the event. So this time what we will do is, we will use the Apex class because we wanted to insert the data, right? Insert the data into the database. Once the data is inserted into the database, then I wanted to return the ID back to the child component. Then child component sends the ID to the event. Event is going to send to parent component, and based on that ID, parent component will call the Apex class method 2. While calling the Apex class method 2, it will pass the parameter ID. It will take the ID based on the ID. So where condition ID. So based on the ID, the SOQL query is going to retrieve the data, and then it is going to send the, whatever the output is there, going to send it to parent component. Now we can see the data. Once it is retrieved here, we can see the data here, whatever the data is there. Right, so this is how we have to implement it. So this is the scenario that we are going to implement further classes. So for this to understand, the first thing which we need to understand is how to enable the connection between the Lightning component and Apex class. How to enable the connection between these two. First, I need to understand how to enable the connection between the Lightning component and the Apex class. How can I enable the connection? So in order to understand that, so once we are clear with that, then we will go with this assignment, this work. Okay, so first we need to understand the connection, how to connect the Apex class with the Lightning component. For that, we have something called helper. We have something called helper. Now, what is the helper here? Now, let's understand the backend logic of helper. What happens when we write a helper class? So we know that Lightning Aura bundle has one of the component called helper, like a component, JavaScript, helper, right? Render, pre-render, design, style, CSS. So we have these components. Now, when we write those components, what happens? Let's take the example. I have an account list component. Inside the account list component, I'm calling two components here, component 1, component 2. That means I have this account list Lightning Aura component. Account list Lightning Aura component. In this account list component, I'm calling another Lightning component, which is account 1 CMP, which has a controller, account 1 controller JS, which has a account 1 helper.js. And there is another Lightning component. Here it is a 2. So account component 2 dot CMP, account component 2 controller.js, account 2 helper.js. So this is account 1 and this is account 2 component. These two components which we have implemented, we have merged everything into the account list component. Account list component. Now this is how we have written in the developer console. How we have written in the developer console. But while running this logic, for example, I'm executing this component. While running the component, what happens? Same component, if I'm running it account list, while running the account list, what happens? So the account1.cmp, account1.controller And the second one, account2.cmp, account2controller.js. So basically CMP will have a CMP component as it is, it will create it, right? So while running the framework creates an instance of the controller here. That means it is creating the instance of CMP, it is creating the instance of JS, as well as for the account2, it is creating the instance for account2 CMP, creating the instance for account2 controller. But where is the helper here? Where is the helper? So actually what happens during the runtime is the helper logic gets shared between the components. Helper logic is shared between the components. Instead of you implementing the two helper classes in the each component, what we can do is we can use just one helper class and we can share that helper class. That means during the runtime, when you are looking at the code, you see only one helper. But actually, when you are running at the backend Salesforce is going to share that helper among all the components. What are the components are there among all of them, it is going to be shared. So that means while running the framework creates an instance of the controller, right? Like an instance of the controller and instance of the, if it is a renderer, is the renderer. For each component, it is creating this, but creates only one copy of the helper. It creates only one copy of the helper. One copy of the helper. And what is the use of that one copy of the helper? Basically, it passes the whatever the logic is written. This logic can be used by the account1 CMP. This logic can be used by the account2 component. So and passes the references of the helper into every controller instance of every render. So basically, first of all, the benefit of using the helper is reducing the developer work. That means instead of writing the code multiple times, what you can do is you can write the same code in the helper and keep that code into the helper. And whenever you want account to be calling that particular logic, account to go to the helper and it will get the information. So reusability code is going to be reduced. So since here the helper is shared across these two components, it allows us to share and keep the logic across the controller, and you can call this helper from controller, you can call this helper from renderer. That means this helper will be called from account1 controller. This helper can be called from account2 controller. So that means you can keep your logic in one place, and whenever you need it, you can simply call that helper class. That's the reason in the real time, we have to write the business logic in the helper. Most of the members are writing the business logic in the JavaScript. Fine, we can write it, that there is no restriction that I have to write a business logic only here, not here. You can write a business logic in the controller also, controller JS also. You can write the business logic in the controller also, as well as the helper also. But if you're writing the business logic in the controller, let's assume that there are multiple components which you need to hit the apex class. Right, you have almost 3 components, and 3 components has to be hitting the apex controller, which is the account list controller. When you are hitting the controller there, every time this controller goes to the server side call. So that means if you are writing here, the logic, it goes to the server side and get the logic and bring it to you back, bring it to the Lightning component. Similarly, account2, again the logic is written in the controller. Again, it will hit the server side call and it will check the same logic. There is no difference between the account. Whenever you are calling here from the account1 controller, when you are calling from the account to controller to the Apex class, logic is same. But what is happening here? Multiple API calls are happening between the client side and server side. Client side and what are the database you are hitting, or you are pulling the data from database, whatever the logic you are doing. That means you are calling the Apex multiple times, which is not needed. Ultimately, as a developer, front view, they cannot see any difference. But at the back end, there is a lot of difference when you write the code into the helper and when you write the code into the controller, right? So we cannot see any differences with our eyes. We cannot see any differences when I'm writing the code into the controller. But there is a difference at the performance level. How many calls are happening between the Lightning component to the Apex class? Those calls and everything will be calculated. And you are repeating the code here. So we can reduce the reusability. Like if you are writing the repeated code in multiple controller, better you push everything into the helper and use this helper, call this helper from this controller, call this helper from this controller, so that it will be easy for at least backside. Because what happens in the real time is whenever it is running the controller, what are the logic that we have written here, Salesforce converts into the native JavaScript. Converts the logic into the native JavaScript. So when you are repeatedly, if you are writing it and hitting the Apex class multiple times, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. So definitely the performance at the backend is going to be improved. So, and helper extension, like when you are writing the helper, the extension is .js, same as a controller, .js. Right, so this helper can be called from this controller. If you have a renderer, then you can call it from the renderer also. Is everybody clear with helper here? So helper can reuse the functions defined in helper, improve code reuse. As we are writing the logic in the helper common, it is going to improve the code and also performance, and sharing the JavaScript in component bundle will help a lot of performance, right? And use the helper for defining the data processing task and queuing the server side. Whenever you wanted to call the Apex class, that time, make sure you are writing the logic into the helper. Because if sometimes what happens is in the controller, we will be writing the so many functions. Now I have this controller. In this controller, I'll be writing one function here, I'll be writing one function here, I'll be writing another function. Like this, we will be writing it. But in each one of them, I'll be calling the Apex class here. Right? Instead of this, combine everything and then place the logic into the helper. So that what will happen, helper only one time it will call the server side, the Apex class, and it will store the data. From the controller, you can call the helper class and it will return the value back to you. And helper extension is .js and controller also .js. Helper functions are local to component. That means it's a local component. It can be shared with any component. It is called as a local component. Helpers are called as a local component. So a helper function can be called from any JavaScript code in the components bundle, such as a client-side controller and a renderer. Client-side controller is nothing but the Lightning controller, or a renderer. You can call it from there. So even if you need it from within the helper also, you can call from the helper itself. So that means if this is a controller and if this is a helper, then Either you can call the helper from the controller, multiple controllers can call helper, or else within the helper also you can call the same method, which is possible, Now, so help, like we know that controller, when you are writing the JavaScript controller, right? When you are writing the JavaScript controller, hold on a second. Okay, so when you are writing the JavaScript controller, so that means if I am opening the developer console, okay, so let's open the existing one, open resource. So let's take a calculator. So here controller has a 3 parameters. Controller has 3 parameters: component, event, helper. Whereas helper has only 1 parameter. Helper has only 1 parameter, which is called as a component. Helper has only 1 component, only 1 parameter. Whereas controller has you can have a component, event, helper, right? But helper has only 1 parameter. Now you can pass after this, if you have any other values that you wanted to pass, you can pass it. But you cannot pass the component, comma, helper, comma, event. This thing you cannot pass it. Out of these 3, only component can be called, but rest of other details, like you wanted to pass number, you can pass it. If you wanted to pass string, you can pass it. These things you can pass it. But out of component, event, helper, out of these 3, you cannot use the event, comma, helper here. You cannot use event, comma, helper here. It has to be only 1 parameter. It has to be only 1 parameter. Now, helper function, the component, right? Handle helper function component, that's what we have seen. Now, if I have implemented a logic, if I have assumed that if I have implemented a logic here, right? The common logic which I have implemented. If I have to call this component from the JavaScript, if I have to call this component from the JavaScript, how can I call it? What is the command for it? So the command is you need to mention helper. You need to mention helper dot handle helper, because your function name is in the helper, your function name is handle helper. So in order to call this handle helper, you need to specify helper dot handle helper and pass the component. This is from the JavaScript. From the JavaScript, you will be calling helper dot handle helper, and within that 1 parameter which is says component. Second one, in case if you wanted to call within the helper. Now I have a function is already implemented. Within the same helper, I wanted to call the previous function. Now let's assume that this is my helper class. In this helper class, I have a function called handle helper. Handle helper. Now in this handle helper, now this is one function. Now I have another function which is says helper 1. Now within this helper 1, so basically what I need here, I need to call the handle helper from here. I need to call handle helper from the helper 1. So this is lightning helper. This is lightning helper component. Now, how can I call if I have to call within this? If it is a within this, then we have to use the keyword called this. Rest all are same. This dot, you have to use the handle helper component. Only the change that you will see is if you are calling within the same component, then you have to use the this keyword. If you are calling the helper from JavaScript or a renderer, then you have to use helper dot. You have to use helper dot. If it is a within the helper, then it has to be this dot. Any questions so far? Okay. Now the next thing comes into the picture, like when to use the controller, when should I use the helper? Now this confusion is for everyone, almost all the developers, even interviewer also ask the same question. This is just to confuse you. This is just to confuse you because though we have a clarity, but sometimes what we do is as a developer, we write helper logic within the controller without knowing what is happening at the backend. So that's the reason for interviewer, it is a very easy to confuse you by asking this question, what is the difference between the controller and helper? So simple thing, use a controller to listen user in event. That means in the form, you have an input field. You have a input field. If you want, if user is entering the some data here, if user is entering the some data here, user is entering some data. In order to capture this data, you need a controller. You need a controller. So use controller to listen user input. Whereas helper, you need it to call the business logic. My business logic is sitting somewhere here, right? To call the business logic. So helper is used to call the business logic. So that is the difference. That is one of the difference. So helper is to call the business logic. So use the controller to listen to user event, whereas helper is, we will be using the helper to call the business logic. Now, why this was one of the time, why this question was very famous in the interview is because all the developers, almost, I cannot say all, almost every developer, they were writing the business logic in the controller, right? So that means we gave a hint to the interviewer who knows actually what happens when I write a business logic in the controller, what happens if I write a business logic in the helper, who knows the behind the story of it, or who does not know why I have a helper and a controller. I'm not sure. Those people will be got a chance to ask why you need a controller and helper. This is actually the developer has given a hint to the interviewer, but actual purpose is that if you want a user event, somebody to listen in the Lightning Aura component, you need a controller. But if you want business logic to be called, then write the logic into the helper. That's how they differentiate between the controller and helper. And the second one is, if developer need to call one controller function from another controller, then the best is to move your code to the helper. That means you are writing some logic in the controller, right? You need to call. So basically, let me give one example. I have two buttons. Let's say it this way. Okay, I have two buttons. One button is, let's say it says good morning, and another one, it says good afternoon. One button says good morning and another button says good afternoon. Another button says good afternoon. Now when user click on first button, when user click on this button, it is printing the same lines. Assume that it is printing some lines of code. 4 lines of code. When the user clicks on a good afternoon, same lines it is repeating. Basically, this text, the body is not changing. Body is not changing. There is only one thing which is changing is last text is changing, but rest all are same. When I click on this, everything is same except the last line. When I click on this, everything is same except the last line. But what we are writing here, we are writing this logic in the two functions, in the two methods. In the first method, I'm writing this logic because whenever the user click on this GM, on click event, I'm calling the function in the controller, I'm writing the logic. Right? When user click on a GA button, there is another function here. In this function also, I'm calling the same logic, right? Same thing which is repeated here. So this kind of what are the code that we are writing it, we can combine that everything into one. We can combine the code into one, which is called as a helper. Now, instead of you repeating the code, just write the common logic in the helper, so that what will happen is it will reduce the execution of the lines or performance. Everything will be it is going to be easier at the back end. And another way is in the JavaScript controller, when you have a heavy code, when I say heavy code, let's take an example of calculator. So we have long back, we have implemented the calculator here, right? So when we have implemented the calculator, when you click on a plus button here, the logic has to be executed addition. When you click on a subtraction, the logic has to be executed subtraction. When you click on a multiplication, right? So the logic has to be executed the multiplication. So which is a heavy code because the logic only plus minus multiplication, those are the things which are changing. The rest all input 1, input 2 is same. So these kind of a heavy logic, whatever you see in the JavaScript, if you see anything on the heavy load on the JavaScript, that heavy load, push it to the helper. Heavy load, push it to the helper, so that helper will take care of it. Because helper is a local component for the Lightning. Helper is a local component for the Lightning. So moving the heavy lifting of a JavaScript logic to helper. So this is the main purpose, when to use the controller, when to use the helper. Now, who will decide when to move the changes from JavaScript to helper? It's a developer. Who is implementing the complete component, they should decide where to write the logic. Right? That is where when to use controller and when to use helper. Is that clear for everybody? Okay, so let's move on the use case. So let's say use case is implement Lightning component. So 2 buttons, good morning, good evening, and display the same text if user clicks on a good morning button and good evening button. Let's see the small example. Now let's go to the Visual Studio. Okay, so now let me create a Lightning component. Right click, create a Lightning Aura component. Okay, so let's say that this is LC underscore helper example. Right. Now, perfect. So in the Aura component, definitely I needed 2 buttons, Lightning, colon button. So let's say label. Label equal to 1 is good morning. and click off this button. Exclamation, let's call handle GM. Perfect. Now, lightning button, this is a good afternoon. And handle GF, GA. Now these are the two buttons which I have created. Now let's go to the controller. Copy this. So controller, this is my controller helper, example controller, and handle good afternoon, good morning, and I need another one which says good afternoon. Now here, let me show you some message. Let me print some message. So, okay, so instead of printing it, I'll set it to the attribute. Let's take some attribute which is called as a aura column attribute name equal to, let's take message 1 and type equal to string. Perfect. So I'll take 3 messages. Let's take 4. So message 2, message 3, message 4. Now I need to print that message here. So let me put the paragraph. Let's say message. Then I'm going to print the message 1, message 2, message 3. So first one is a message 1. V dot message 1. Then next one, two, 3, message 4. Okay, so let's save this. Now, in controller, I'm going to set some value. Let's say that component dot set v dot message 1. Let's say good morning. Now same thing, I'm going to say message 2, message 3, message 4. Now here I'll say learning aura component and the message 3 is understanding helper. And the third one is Salesforce org. So same thing, I'm going to do it when they click on the good afternoon, handle GM. So only the difference is here it says that good afternoon. Click on save. Now let's deploy this component. Deploy source to org. So LC helper example. So let's go to the File, let's refresh. File, open resources. Let's see the star.app. So let's use the LA application. LC, C column. This is my component. Now let's click on it, preview button. Now, so when I click on this, it says what is happening? Did I not change the GA? Control save, let's deploy it. Deploy the source to org. I did not change the method name here. Now it is deployed. So let's refresh. So I clicked on the good morning button. The text is coming. Now I clicked on the good afternoon. So what is happening? Only the first message, it is getting changed. The rest all are same. So what I'll do is, instead of the logic that I'm repeating there, simply I'll create a helper. So I'll go to the helper class, helper method, function, component, and then I'm going to move this code. I'm going to move this code to the helper. I'm moving the code to the helper, right? So this helper can be called directly from the controller. This is a helper method. So how can I call from the controller?
Helper.method name.
Helper.method name.
Helper.method.
So my method is helper method. Then we have to pass parameter component. Same thing from the GA. Handle GA, I have to call. Save it. Perfect. So common code I have written in the helper. I'm calling it from the controller. We are calling to helper. Now let's deploy this code. Deploy source to org. Now let's refresh. Right. So from UI point of view, we cannot see any changes. From UI point of view, we cannot see the changes. But there is a backside, how many times the logic, everything will be backside, something will be, the differences will be there, because when Salesforce converts the code into the native JavaScript, that time it will see the more easier way to convert it. Now let's take the another scenario, implement a Lightning component to calculator. So you remember that we have worked on the calculator, right? You guys remember the calculator that we have worked long back?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, last time when we implemented the calculator, so calculator, let me open this. Yeah. Yeah, this is the one. So here, what we have done is, we have created two attributes, and the card, inside the card, we have created a layout, multiple rows equal to true. And inside the layout item, this is my div. And then what we have The first time in first row, it is displaying the clear percentage division. In the second row, it is displaying the 7, 8, 9 star. In the next row, it is displaying the 4, 5, 6 minus. In the next row, it is displaying the 1, 2, 3 and plus. Next, the last row is 0, 0, 0 dot equal to. This is how the UI is going to be displayed. And what we have done last time, we have implemented one controller. Actually, we have implemented 2 controllers. But here, in this case, what we have done, every number, whenever I click on a number, whenever we click on a number, whether it is a 1 to 0, 0 to 9, between any number, if I click on it, same controller, we are calling it. Same controller, we are calling. What we are doing in the controller, we are just capturing that which number is clicked. Right, the component is captured here. Event dot get source, the component is captured, right? And then we are trying to understand which button. Is it a 1 button? Is it a 4 button? Is it a 6 number button? Is it a 8 number button? Which button has been clicked on it? So we captured that. After capturing that, so what we are doing is we are checking whether we have a current number, anything is there or not. That means before coming to here, now first what I'll do here in the calculator. In the calculator, first I'll enter, I'll select a 1, right? Here I'll selecting 1. That is a current one. Now if I'm selecting here, plus and then 2. What is happening? I need to know what is my previous value and what is the current value. In that case, what I'm doing here, I'm taking the current number, and if there is any existing number, that means previous number. Current number is, so here current number in a sense, it is a previous number actually. Okay, so because we have not yet set the second here. So just I have entered I have clicked on a 2 number button. So when I clicked on a 2 number button, what was the previous one? The previous one, I'm going to take it here. And then whatever the number which I clicked on here, the button label, this is the current number. Whatever the number which I have clicked on, and this is the previous number. Previous number, I'm combining here. Because if I say that 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, concatenation should be happen, right? I'm entering 67. So I need to take the previous one and as well as the latest one, which I need to take it. So far, I have not entered any operator. Okay, I'm just concatenating here. Whatever the previous one is there and whatever the current one is there, I'm just concatenating. In case there is no previous value, then I'll just use the current, whatever the current is there, that button label, I'll set it to the current. And then we are showing the result, whatever the current number is there, we are showing the result. Now we have not implemented the helper method. So what I'll do is, let me take this. C colon LC underscore custom calculator. Click on save. Now refresh. Now, what is happening? This is current number. And again, I'm clicking on 8. So what are the previous number and the current number? It is concatenating. It is concatenating. So whatever I entered the previous number. So what is this mean? That means I should not be losing the previous value. Till I hit any operator, I should not lose any of them. I should not lose any of them. If I click on any operator, then I should, that means this should be, like for example, if I click on a plus button, And if I click on a 3, then it should come as a new number. But so far, whatever I'm entering here, I'm just entering the numbers. I'm not entering any operator here, right? So in that case, so that's the reason I have written the logic here. I'm checking whether I have an existing one. If there is an existing one is there, concatenate with the existing one and the current one. That is the logic. Now, today what I'm going to do is we have a operators here. We have a operators. So for this operator, we have to implement a common method. So on click equal to, what I'll do is curly braces, exclamation, C dot, I'll say handle operator, handle operator, and let's say that Aura ID equal to mod. Aura ID equal to mod. Now same thing which I'm going to use it for all of them. So here division is there. For division, I'm going to use the Aura ID as div. And we have multiplication here. So here I'm going to use the mult Aura ID. And then we have a subtraction here, which I'm going to use it as sub. For all the operators, I'm going to use same controller I'm going to call. Here it is a add. No. The last one which I have is equal to. For this also, what I'll do is I'll use the same operator for equal to also. So here calculate. Let's say all the operators has a handle operator. Now I'll take this handle operator. I'll go to the controller. In the controller, I'll be implementing the handle operator. Now function, component. In this handle operator, what do I need to do when I click on the plus button? Let's take example of plus button. When I click on a plus button, for example, I'm clicking on here 3, right? So when I click on 3 and then when I click on a plus button, two things which should happen here. One is whatever the last number it is there. That means one is whatever the last number. So as soon as I click on a plus button, this is my last number, right? So get me the last number. Get me the last number. What was the last number it was there? What was the last number it was there? Get that. And then give me the operator. So which operator has been selected? Which operator has been selected here, which is a plus button? Which operator has been selected? Plus button. And also, if there is, for example, assume that I have entered 3 plus, so 2, okay? So this is what I have entered. So I need to have a previous one as well as current one. So the previous one is stored in the last number. Whatever the previous ones are there, all of them are stored because I might be entering here 3 plus 2 plus 4 plus 5 plus like all this I'll be entering, right? So all this number should be stored into the last number. And whatever the current is there, the current should be having the current number. That means what is the right now the number which is entered. So where I'm storing into the current number. How do I know I'm storing into the current number? Because when you go to the first method, at the end of here, whatever the current one is there, you are storing into the current number. You are storing into the current number. So current number is going to give me that. Perfect. So this is operator. Operator also I need to know the previous operator as well as the current operator. Previous operator as well as the current operator, both I need to know. So assume that this is a previous operator and then I need to know the current operator. Right? So the current, what is the user has entered right now? What is the user has entered? Now, in this case, what I need is if there is a no previous operator, if there is a no previous operator, the logic should be directly store whatever your current operator is there, directly store it. Directly store. That means previous operator is no. The condition is no. There is no previous operator. Then directly store this current operator into the some variable. If there is a previous operator is there, that means it is a yes. If there is a previous operator is there, then what you have to do is you need to put everything into the last number, right? The last number, and also that means here we have a, if what are the previous ones are their operators, you need to take that along with that, store everything into one variable. That means you need a variable which stores the array. You need a variable which stores the array. So one variable which you needed to store the array, one variable which you needed to store the attribute operator. So whatever the operator is there, so you need another variable or another attribute to store this. So what I'll do is I'll create a two attributes. One is array attribute, one is operator attribute. One is array attribute and the second one is operator attribute. So using this, we are going to make changes. So let's go ahead and see. So first create a component. Let's go to the component. Now I already have a result current number. I need few more here. So I'll say aura attribute. Aura attribute name equal to, let's say I'm going to take one is a last number, which is this is a array. But what is the value it can store here? It can store the value, the data type could be a integer, could be a double, because sometimes we will be entering the 2.5, 3.5, 6.7. Like this, we will be entering. So what are the numbers that we are entering? Everything should be stored here. Everything should be stored, which is an array here. So default, I'm going to take it as an array. Default, I'll take it as an array. Now this is one number. This is one last number attribute which I have created. Now the next one which I need is the operator. To store the operator, similar like a current number, I need a current operator.
Ma'am, default spelling, ma'am.
Okay. So current operator is also string and the default is null. So I have done with creating the two attributes. One is the last number and the second one is current operator. Perfect. So we have a capturing the number, we have an attribute, capturing the operator, we have it, storing all the previous values into the number, we can store here, and the final result we have. So these are the four attributes we needed so far. Now let's go to the controller. In the controller, the first thing which I'm going to do is let's store this, whatever the last number data is there. So let's say num array equal to component dot get. First, get me all the one. Whatever we have, get me everything. Similarly, operator also. Similarly, operator also. So let's say that equal to component dot get v dot. We have current operator. Perfect. And then we are storing into the current number, right? So get me the current number. Constant current number equal to component dot get current number. Now that's all. Then whatever the user has entered the button, right? This method is called by the mod, and this method is called by div. This method is called by multiplication. This method is same method we are calling by multiple operators are calling same method. So the next thing is which I need to understand is which button, which operator button that user has clicked on. So for that, I need to know event dot. How can we know that? How to know that which component is user clicked on it?
Event dot find.
Component. Event dot.
Event dot. How can we get what is the component that we have the user has clicked?
Component dot get.
Get what we will do. We do not have a value here.
Get ID, Aura ID.
How can we get the Aura ID? How to get the Aura ID?
Event dot find, we need to pass the ID inside the find.
How to find the ID, the local ID? What is this? What is this? Event dot get source dot get local ID. What will happen?
Yeah, this will get ID of button.
Right. So in order to get the Aura ID, we need to use the get source dot get local ID.
Local ID.
ID.
Now, all this getting the information is done. Getting the information is done. Next thing I'm going to check, is there any previous one is there or not? If there is a no previous one, if there is no previous one, so simply what I'll do is, whatever the current operator is there, so I'll use component dot set, and whatever the current operator is there, just I'll place it, whatever the current one is there. So this is the previous operator, and this is the current one. So in case if there is nothing is there, I'll simply store it into the current one. Now, the current numbers which I'm getting it from here, handle numbers, which I'm getting the current number. So I'll go to the current number. I'll check whether if I have any current number. If I have any current number. If I have any current number. So what I'll do is, whatever the numbers I'm entering, What are the numbers I'm entering? I don't want to lose those numbers. I don't want to lose those numbers. So basically what I wanted to push everything into the list numbers, because this is the array. Everything can be stored in this array. So what I'll do is simply I'll push all my data into here in this num array. So first thing, I need to push this current number to last number, and then I need to merge to the existing one. Now how I'll do it? First I'll set it component.set component.set. Then I'm going to use here the what are the current number is there. Set here current number as well as. Now I have an array. In this array, push the data. In this array, push the data. Okay. Next. Perfect. This is done. Now we are going to check what is the length of this array. Is it a greater than, or is it a less than 0, or is there any value or not? If it is if my array dot length, if it is a greater than or equal to, let's take a number 2. Okay, because if it is more than number 2, that means if I have a more than number 2 numbers, then what I'll do is, that means I need to do this logic. 2 numbers means what? Now here I have entered. So clear 3 plus 3, which I have entered. That means either equal to 2 numbers or more than 2 numbers. When I'm entering the 2 numbers and when I'm clicking on this plus button, that means I wanted to perform certain action there. I need to perform addition action there. When I clicked on the plus button, I wanted to perform addition action. So for that addition action, what I'll do is first I'll go to the helper. In the helper, I'll implement the logic. Just a second. Okay, so from the controller, so here, whenever my numbers are more than 2, when my numbers are more than 2, that means I need to perform certain operation here. Either I need to perform by clicking on the plus button, I need to perform a addition, or when I click on a minus, I need to perform a subtraction. When I click on a multiplication, I need to perform a multiplication. Now what I'll do for now, I'm going to implement a logic only for addition. Only for addition. So what I'll do in the helper class is, I'll create another method. I'll create another method. So let's say that this is a helper method, let it be there. I'll create a add. I'll create a add function, and in this, in order to know this, basically, what is the parameter that I need to pass it for the here? The parameter which I need to pass it here is simply only one attribute which I need to pass it. What is that attribute that I need to pass it? Whatever this num array is there, that attribute which I need to pass it here, right? So what will happen here? It will return whatever the first number is there. So take the first number plus, and then take the second number. That's it. Now this method I need to call. Either I can call directly from the controller, or else I can directly call it from here. Let's say that I wanted to call it from the same helper. If I have to call it from the same helper, then I need to use this dot add. Then I have to use, we need to pass the component called, a parameter called num array. By passing this, what will happen? It will call this. Now this needs to be written back to the controller. Now, whenever the num array length is greater than or equal to 2, so what I need is, I need to call helper method, and here I need to have a num array which I am passing. So what is happening here? First I am calling the helper method from the controller. We are calling the helper method from the controller. From this helper method, again I am calling the another helper method which is called as a add. Right? So 2 times I'm calling here. One is from the controller, I'm calling the helper method. This time I'm passing the num array, and from the helper, I'm calling again another helper. Within the same helper, I'm calling another helper which is called add. In order to call that, I'm using the this dot add, then I'm passing the num array. But this num array here has to be num array. Okay, so from here, I'm passing the num array, I'm getting the num array, and then passing the num array to the add, and then I'm returning the value. Perfect. And let's store this output value into the result. Let's store this into the result. Once I have the result, whatever the current operator is there, let me set back. Okay, so this line will be again executed. Because this line, whatever I have written, this line will be executed, the 37th line, only when I do not have a previous operator. But what about you are done with the current operator and you are moving on to the next operator? Then you need to store, right? So in order to store that, you need to again write that logic here. Now, the next one is whatever the result is there, the result has to be stored in the last number. Because if I add the numbers here, 2 plus 3, which is equal to 5. And again, if I add 5 plus 2, again it has to sum up, what is 7. If I add plus 1, again it has to sum up 8. So that means whatever the previous output is there, that output I need to store it somewhere. Because if I keep on adding the operator like this, that means I need an attribute which needs to be stored the information. So where I'm going to store that, I'm going to store it into the last number, component.set. And then whatever the result is, the result I'm going to store it here. Result I'm going to store here. Perfect. That is within the if condition. Once the if condition is executed, then I have the result. But this result has to be stored into in order to display here, because I need to replace this place. So whatever this place is there, this place needs to be showing the final output. So in order to show that, we already have an attribute. Which is called result. So I'll use this result, go to the controller. In the controller. So once we are done with the if condition, component.set v.result, comma, whatever the result is there, I'm going to set that. Okay. Once everything is done, so what I'll do is I have a number, right? So whatever the previous number is there, that number has to be removed. Whatever I have entered the number, remove that number. Now let's go ahead and execute it. Refresh. Okay. 3 plus, okay, result is not defined. Okay, so result is not defined. We have not defined the result. Okay, we have not defined the result. So what I'll do is I'll just declare the here. Let me use let result equal to, let's say, whatever the num array of 0 is there, I'll just take that. Let's refresh, click on refresh here. Now let's enter 3 plus or something happening. Why it is happening? 3 plus clear 3 plus okay. So multiple things are happening here. Now let me refresh here. I entered 9. I cleared it. I entered 6 plus gone. Okay, few things which we need to add it here. The first thing which we need to add is whatever the current number we are taking it. By default, system will take it as a string. So first we need to convert that into the parse float. Parse float. So convert that into the integer or a float or a double. So I'm converting that into the float. Now, when I click on a clear, right now we are doing the result equal to 0, current number equal to null. But what about the last number? Right, so the last number has to be set. Component dot set v dot last number. So this is a array. So I'm going to define it array. Now I have a result, current number, last number, but what about operator? Component dot set v dot component. So let me make this as a null. Now to understand whether it is hitting the helper or not, so I'll put an alert here. Alert. Let me num array. Okay, so let's refresh. Five plus something happening. It's not calling the controller. It is not calling the controller. Let's click on inspect. Okay. Okay, so console source, lighting application component. Inside this component, let me open this Chrome. LA application, file, open resource, LA application. Click on preview. Right click, inspect. Source, component. When I click on a plus button, immediately the code is going out. What is the reason? So we have taken the last number, current operator, current number. Till this point is good. I'm getting the operator ID. Let's making the changes, component dot this, and then I have a current number. Component dot console dot log. Let's print current number. Let me add debugger also. So let's refresh.
Swapna,
Yeah.
I'm having one question. Just correct me if I'm wrong. You are taking the result and you are showing the values, right? But we did not mention anywhere on screen. Show the operator, right?
No, operator I have not mentioned anywhere to show. Only the number.
So that's why when you are clicking on the operator, that's why it is not showing, right? I think.
That is a display purpose. I'm not displaying it, but at the back end it is happening.
Okay.
See, this time it is called 2. But when I click on this plus,
I think it is concatenation was happening.
so console, it's not even printing the value. Something is happening. Handler help operator, handle operator. Hitting handle operator. Okay, click on refresh. Three plus I'm trying here. Printing 5. Okay. Let me open this class file, open resource, component, last number, type, double, default, that is perfect. Result decimal 0, current number. This is fine. But this why it is going out? Okay, so let's go to the controller. Hitting it, it's coming here, the number. Then it's going inside it, component.set. Result I'm getting here. Okay. Let me put this code inside it. Because once I have the number, then only I'll clean up. Let's save. Let's refresh. Five plus 2 equal to, it's not clearing out the previous one. Okay. So helper cut. Let me do this. Let result before if condition, because on top I'll not be having here num array. We pass operator also here. Click on refresh. Five plus result is null. Okay. So the problem is here. I'm pushing again the num array within the num array. So 5 plus 3 equal to 8. Okay, perfect. Now we are getting the output. Let me take out all the unnecessary thing. What else? Debugger console.log. Let's refresh. Let's save. Take out this, click on clear. So now I'll enter 3 plus the operator I'm not displaying here, but at the back end it is captured. Now if I enter 6, the previous value is gone away and it is taking the new value. If I click on it equal to, it is showing me the 9. So whatever the addition is there, it is showing me the addition value, right? So if I enter again plus 3 or 2 equal to whatever it is, and plus again 1 equal to, it's called keep on increasing it, right? 16 plus if I take a 6, then 22, right? It's keep on increasing the number till if I click on a clear, what will happen? It will clear the value. Now if I select 45 plus 32, then what is happening? It is taking the total. Now, similarly, I need to implement this logic for the addition, multiplication, subtraction, for everything I need to do. So that means I need to write this code. You can write it in different way. Directly, instead of calling the helper, you can write here addition method, subtraction method, multiplication method, or everything you can write it. But instead of that heavy code writing there, what I'm doing is I'm just putting here sub, and then this is a subtraction, then I'm using the sub here. I'm not writing any other code here, just for the each operator, like if we have a subtraction, multiplication, division, this is subtraction, this is multiplication. And we have a division, also we have a mod. Mod, right? So this time, I don't know which one is user is entering. I don't know which one is user entering. Initially, we just implemented only for addition. Only for addition. But here, based on the operator, I need to call this, or I need to call this, or I need to call this, or I need to call this. Based on the second one operator, based on that, I need to call respective function. To do that, so that means first I need to identify the operator, right? Which operator? Is it an add operator, or is it a plus operator, or is it a different operator? What I'll do is, instead of writing so much of code in order to identify the operator, I can just do this, because in order to call the any method within the helper, we use this dot. This, instead of a dot method name, what I'll do is, I'll use a square bracket. Within the square bracket, I'll use the operator. And then pass this num array. Pass this num array. Now, what is this means, right? So no, I'm telling the system, you look at the operator. You look at which operator. Based on that, you decide which one you wanted to call. How will I know which operator it is? Because we are getting the operator event dot get source, get local ID. So what is the name which I'm getting here? Mod, div, and mult, sub, add, right? So those are the aura ID. So here it is matching with the same thing, add, sub, mult, div, mod. Now if it is this and then bracket, if it says add, then go to this. If this whatever the bracket is there, the bracket will convert into the dot, the particular method. Dot, the particular method. So based on this, you go and search it and give me the result. Because I cannot write a return for sub, return for mod, return for this, return for that. I cannot do that. So simply what I can do, return this square bracket and call, I'm passing the operator here. That operator is whatever the aura ID is there. That's the same operator. I'm getting it here, and based on that, I'm calling that method and passing the num array to everybody. Now, once I pass the num array, sometimes multiplication, I have a star, and division, I have this division, and then mod has a mod. So the output for the multiplication, division, mod, sometimes it is a decimal, sometimes it is a float, right? It might change. So in order to make it smooth, what I'll do is a little bit add a condition here. So this condition, I'm using the math dot round. Give me the round figure. Give me the round figure. And what are the output I'm getting it here? This operator num array multiplying with 100 and divided by with 100. So round figure it is going to give. So sometimes what happened, 3.5666666999 and something will give. So instead of that, that will happen for the multiplication or a division or a modification. So in order to maintain for every operator, I'm just using the math.round and then putting everything inside this multiplication of 100 by 100. That's it. So let's click on a save button. Now refresh this. Now I'll say 7 plus 3 equal to match is math. Okay, let's refresh. 8 plus 1 equal to 9, multiplication of 2 equal to, what is the problem? This operator is not functioning, failing it. Handle operator. So it's not going to the mult. Why it is not going to the mult? Go here. And it says mult, handle operator. Okay, let me do one thing. Okay, it's working. And 5 by 2 equal to 2.5. Clear 6 by 2. Okay. So what is happening is it is working if it is individual, but once it is divided, now if I wanted to multiply that value with here, so which does not work because we need to write a logic separately for first you did a minus or a subtraction, you did it, then you wanted to perform addition, right? So multiple operators you wanted to handle. Right now we are not handling the multiple operators, the same operators which we are handling. Okay, so multiple operator is, it's again another concept. So why I have taken the calculator is the logic which whatever we are writing this logic in the helper method, if I write it into the controller, it is going to be the heavy lift onto the controller. So what I have done, there is already the logic is in the controller. Whatever I see that there is a maximum, all the common logic will be there. That piece of the code that I have pushed into the helper. And then I'm handling the data. Then I'm handling the data. So this is just an example. How can we push our code to the helper, the heavy lifting code, and how can we call the helper from the controller, and how can I call the helper method within the same helper? If it is a dynamic way, if I wanted to call, how can I call the dynamic way, the helper method? Is that clear? Any questions so far? Okay. So next one is a calling a service side class. This calling a service side class, again, 1 hour it is going to take. So probably I'll push it to the tomorrow's class. We will see how to call the server side class. The first scenario is done. Pushing, how can I push the code to the helper, and from the helper, how can I call? From the controller, how can I call the helper, the data, how can I pass the parameters? The first thing is done. Now the second thing is that how can I call the server side controller, the business logic from the helper? We will see tomorrow.